All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking one of the most incredibly complex geopolitical relationships on the planet, the decades-long standoff between the United States and Iran. Now, this is a topic that is so often clouded by intense rhetoric. But by sticking strictly to our source material, we're going to piece together exactly how, and more importantly, why, these two nations just continually clash. Okay, let's dive into this. We need to start with the central mystery. Why are the US and Iran locked in this endless cycle of tension? What's driving this dynamic where hostilities are constantly boiling over, yet they never quite spill into a complete, total war? That's exactly what we need to figure out today. We're going to uncover the actual gears turning behind the scenes that keep this specific engine of conflict running year after year. To start, we have to establish a foundational premise. When we talk about US-Iran hostilities, we are not talking about a full-scale war or an all-out invasion. This relationship is entirely defined by targeted actions. We're talking highly specific military strikes, punishing economic sanctions, cyber operations, and really complex proxy conflicts. Understanding this scope right away is absolutely crucial because it completely changes how we measure the wins and losses in this ongoing global chess match. So here is our roadmap for today. 1. The roots of hostility. 2. A case study on Soleimani. 3. Debating the wins. And 4. The escalation and fallout. Part 1. The roots of hostility. The drivers of this hostility are massive, and honestly, they're everywhere. At the very top is Iran's nuclear program. The US and its allies are deeply afraid that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. You probably remember the JCPO, the 2015 nuclear deal aimed at curbing this, which the US actually withdrew from in 2018, leading to some pretty harsh sanctions. But it doesn't stop there. The US views Iran's efforts to expand its regional influence as a major threat to allies like Saudi Arabia and Israel. Add in things like human rights abuses, the development of ballistic missiles that can literally reach US bases, and this constant, ongoing cycle of retaliation, and you have a deeply entrenched web of grievances. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Iran actually operates. One of their primary methods of projecting power is proxy warfare. Instead of deploying their own uniformed military to directly fight adversaries, Iran funds, arms, and trains various groups all across the Middle East. It's an incredibly effective strategy for them. By backing groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and various Shia militias, Iran can strike at U.S. allies and assets while keeping a crucial layer of plausible deniability. It effectively lets them fight major conflicts across an entire region without ever officially setting foot on the battlefield. And guys, this isn't just some distant political issue that doesn't affect us. Iran has repeatedly seized tankers and attacked commercial ships in strategic waterways, most notably the Strait of Hormuz. When you consider that roughly a fifth, 20% of the world's daily oil consumption passes through this one specific bottleneck, any threat here directly endangers global energy supplies. It threatens everyday commerce. It is a potent, real-world reminder of how regional tensions can instantly ripple out and hit economies around the entire globe. Moving into part 2, case study Soleimani. To really see how that retaliation driver works in practice, let's look at this rapid timeline of escalation. In late 2019, an Iranian-backed militia attack killed a U.S. contractor. Just a little bit later, by December, the U.S. embassy in Baghdad was literally stormed by protesters and militia members. Following this incredibly tense chain of events, in January 2020, the United States executed a highly targeted military strike, killing Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. The U.S. justification for this monumental strike was very clear and direct. They cited an imminent threat to American lives. Our source material notes that this justification was coupled with Soleimani's long history of directing attacks against U.S. forces in his role as the head of the Quds Force, which is an entity the U.S. officially designates as a terrorist organization. Ultimately, the explicitly stated goal of this strike was twofold: to deter future Iranian aggression and to protect U.S. personnel in the region. The objective was absolute protection and deterrence. But that raises a massive analytical question for us, doesn't it? Did it actually work? Which brings us to part 3, debating the wins. And this brilliantly illustrates a core truth of geopolitics. A positive outcome is incredibly subjective. Just look at how a single action is viewed completely differently by the two opposing sides. From the U.S. perspective, the Soleimani strike is viewed as necessary deterrent signaling and a crucial disruption of enemy operations. But if you look at it from the Iranian perspective and that of its allies, that exact same action is viewed as completely unprovoked aggression and a massive, dangerous escalation. Now, if we try to look objectively at the short-term outcomes that the U.S. actually views as positive, they include things like temporarily disrupting the command and control of the Quds force. It signals deterrence, showing resolve against attacks on Americans. It can also selectively strengthen regional alliances by reassuring partners like Israel and Saudi Arabia that the U.S. is committed to acting against threats. But there's a catch. Our source material includes a massive caveat here. These so-called wins are highly contested, they're mixed in their success, and they are almost always temporary. Part 4. The escalation and fallout. Let's walk through this table because there's a very direct cause and effect relationship to these maneuvers. When the U.S. applies maximum pressure sanctions, it often inadvertently empowers political hardliners in Iran who use the hostility to rally domestic support, while at the same time, it severely harms everyday civilians. When the U.S. executed the Soleimani strike, the immediate fallout was retaliatory missile strikes by Iran directly on U.S. bases in Iraq. And what about the overarching general hostility? Well, it's actively pushing Iran to strengthen its ties with major U.S. adversaries, namely Russia and China. The broader fallout here is just severe. These targeted actions push the U.S. and Iran dangerously close to full-scale war. Counterintuitively, they often lead to an actual increase in proxy attacks. We see more action from militias in Iraq and Syria, and groups like the Houthis in Yemen. It makes any future diplomacy or rebuilding of trust incredibly difficult. It deeply exacerbates instability across the Middle East, and it often draws sharp criticism from international actors. Ultimately, many analysts conclude that the significant risks and the negative fallout completely outweigh those temporary subjective wins. So the crucial point is this. According to the analysis of our sources, the overall consequences of this relationship are overwhelmingly negative. Because there is no large-scale invasion to force a hard conclusion, and because temporary deterrence almost always triggers long-term retaliation, we are just left with a self-perpetuating cycle of confrontation. The gears keep turning, the tensions keep rising, and there is absolutely no clear resolution in sight. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We've seen the data, we've looked at the timelines, and we've analyzed the fallout. If these targeted actions, these sanctions, and these proxy battles ultimately just fuel further retaliation and empower the hardliners, how can this dangerous cycle of confrontation ever actually be broken? Think on that. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you found it insightful. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you in the next one.